Shalom. Giving honor and praise unto the Creator and the Maker of heaven and earth. My name is YESHIAH Yisrael of the tribe of Dan of the nation of Israel. This is a presentation being brought to you from the congregation Shema Yisrael, a Hebrew Israelite Old Testament based congregation located in Brooklyn, New York, giving due respect to the elder and founder of the place, Prince Zippor, as well as his Bane, his son, Prince Nathanael, as well as our beloved Chief Nathanael of the tribe of Levi. Brothers and sisters, this particular teaching will be agreed by some and disagreed by some. Nonetheless, it is in due respect to the Most High that this is being brought out for edification purposes. Let us go to the next slide. MOREH YESHIAH presents his case, part 1. In the past, I have stated that there was no Hebrew way to say Jew. Often, when this statement is made, people say, yes, there is a word for it, Yehudi. We will go over history, language, structure, and scriptures to show that there is no Hebrew word for Jew. Jew, a member of the tribe of Judah, one who practices the religion of Judaism. That's a definition from a dictionary. It should be noted that the word Jew is not in the Torah. The same is true of the word Judaism. Thus, anybody can be a Jew by definition. According to the Jewish Encyclopedia, the religion of Judaism as practiced today is quite different than the, say, Judaism of the Old Testament. Let us go to the next slide. Dan, Zebulun, Egypt, and Ethiopia. Dan, Dani, Zebulani, Mitzri, Kushi. Now, what you're seeing there on the left-hand side where it says Dani, that means Danite. Then you see Zebuloni, which means Zebulonite. Then on the right side, you see Mitzri, which means Egyptian. And underneath that, you see Kushi, which means Ethiopian. So this is something we just want to point out, brothers and sisters, for edification purposes. Next slide. Explanation. We see that E or I, pronounced as E, are in all those words. The E signifies the it or and in English. It is an English suffix, meaning belonging to. And is an English suffix, meaning belonging to. Thus, we see Brooklynite, one who resides in Brooklyn, a native of Brooklyn. The E in most cases in Hebrew signifies possession. This is shown by the Hebrew letter Yod. The word Jew or Jews does not fit those categories. Where we read Jew in Tanakh, the Old Testament, Hebrew is Yehudi or Yehudi. Following a pattern as in Deuteronomy 7, Jeremiah 13, and Judges 13, where you see the aspect of Dani in Judges for Danite and Kushi in Jeremiah 13 in regards to Ethiopian. We see that Yehudi would be Judahite or Judite. Hebrew, a Semitic language of the Afro-Asiatic family, the language of the ancient Hebrews. The source is from Random House Dictionary of the English Language, unabridged edition. So I just wanted to cite the source that I got the information from in that particular regard. Let us go on to the next slide. The letter Sheen. It should be noted that SHEM is the Greek transliteration of the Hebrew word Shem. In Greek, there is no sh syllable. In Hebrew, we see a syllable for sh or sh. And this is the letter that starts off with when you look at the word shalom, for instance. All right, let's go on to the next slide. Greek alphabet. Let's explain and Shem. What you're looking at on the left-hand side is Shem. That right there has the Sheen with the Zere underneath it, and then the Mem Sophit. Okay? Now, what you're looking at on the right-hand side is the Greek alphabet. And if you notice, there is, brothers and sisters, no S within it. Alpha, beta, or SH, should I say. Alpha, beta, gamma, delta, epsilon, zeta, eta, theta, iota, kappa, lambda, mu, nu, xi, omicron, pi, rho, sigma, tau, upsilon, phi, chi, or chi, okay, psi, omega. So when you're looking at that right there is no set aside syllable in Greek for the SH sound, okay? So when ancient Israel would say Shem, the Greek way will be them, all right? That's what you refer to as transliteration, all right? Because as stated and shown here, there is no SH syllable for itself within the Greek language. Let's go on to the next slide. Explanation in Hebrew, let's go. In Hebrew, there are 7 verb stems, several noun patterns in a masculine and feminine. The adjective follows the noun. So therefore, an adjective describes the noun. But in Hebrew, as stated here, the adjective follows the noun. So if you have a noun such as gadol, all right, gadol means big or great, all right? What you would say is Kohen Gadol, the great priest or the high priest. Kohen being priest and that being the noun, but the adjective in Hebrew follows the noun, all right? The pronoun is usually only placed in verbs when wanting to emphasize a point. Ani katapti, I, even I, have written. Now the Hebrew that you see there on the left-hand side spells the word katapti. In any Hebrew verb, noun, or adjective, the Dalet, which gives the D sound, which is the 4th letter in Hebrew, does not drop off. This is important to know because that means that Judah, which has a Dalet in it, must retain the Dalet sound or the D sound in any form it is in. First, let us understand that J is not in Hebrew. The word Yahuda or Yehuda means God is praised, all right? The Huda is from the root word as such, Huda, which comes from the root word Hoda, which comes from the root word Yada, which means to praise. All right. Upon examining the tribes of Israel, we see Judges 13 says Hadani, and the translation is the Danites. First Chronicles 27, verse 16. Simeonite is said in Hebrew as Shem Oni. Judges chapter 12, verse 11. Zebulani. And the translation of that is Zebulunite. So this is something I just want to point out. So Dani, Danite, Shemoni, Simeonite, Zebulani, Zebulunite, Yehudi, Judite, not Jew. All right, if we follow the pattern on how Hebrew works in that regard. Let's go on to the next slide. The matter of the letter Dalet. Dani is Danite and Shemoni is Simeonite. So why would not Yehuda be Judahite or Judite? We'll show that the letter Dalet does not drop in Hebrew. All right, now this is something we want to point out for edification purposes. Hebrew for the Hebrews. Presentation from Shema Yisrael. Let's go. Of the 7 verb stems, we see that the Dalet is never dropped. The letter Dalet is at times moved to a later part of the word. The seventh stem is the Hitpael, sometimes treated as the fifth stem. The Dalet is moved to a later part of the word when a Zadeh TZ sound in Hebrew is present. Now, what you're looking at on the right-hand side, on the top says Zarku, and on the bottom says Zadak. The word Zadak means to be right. Okay? So this is something we want to point out. So when you see on the top there Zarku, that is the third person masculine plural of the root word Zadak. All right? So Zarku literally means they were right when you're speaking in the third person masculine. All right, let's go on to the next slide. Thank you. The Hitpael shows the matter in Hebrew. The Hitpael stem is the reflexive of the stems. Thus, labash, meaning to dress, qual stem, is hit labesh, meaning to dress oneself. It is the reflexive. Somebody is doing the action to him or herself. Zadak means to be right in a qual stem. Is hitstadik in the hitpael stem, meaning to justify oneself. So I want to just show that part for edification purposes. Let's go, if we will, brothers and sisters, into the book of Genesis chapter 44, as you see there, verse 16. All right, so we can gain some understanding of what we're talking about. We are in the book of Genesis chapter 44, verse 16. All right, and it says the following. And Judah said, what shall we say unto my Lord? What shall we speak? Or how shall we clear ourselves? God hath found out the iniquity of thy servants. Behold, we are my Lord's bondmen, both we and also he whose hand the cup is found. Okay, so what we're looking at right here, brothers and sisters, it says, how shall we clear ourselves, which means to justify yourself. Now, that portion there in Hebrew has the noon, the zadeh, the tet, the dalet, and the kuf. As you see there from the Hebrew classes, right? The zadeh has a shawah, so you just join it with the sound previous to it, which happens to be, in this case, the noon with the kirik. Then you got the tet, the dalet, and the kuf. The root is zadak, spelled as zadeh, dalet, and kuf. Okay? The hitpael is hitztadek, spelled as hey, zadeh, tet, dalet, and kuf. Here is the point. The hitpael stem, in this case, switches the verb spelling. So the zadeh has a tet before the next root letter, which is the dalet. No, dalet is still there in the word. It does not drop. In verbs or in nouns, it does not drop off. So when we're dealing in the aspect with the letter dalet, and I want to show for edification purposes what that is. This here is the letter dalet that we always have been talking about in this particular teaching. All right. So whether it is within a noun or within a verb, that letter does not drop off. All right, let's go on to the next part. The matter explained about the hay and the possession. In certain cases, the hay drops out. In this matter, the Torah, law, is said as Torat, law of. Torat becomes Torat ha, your law. The hay becomes a tau. The hay drops in nouns when showing possession. So let's look at this on the left-hand side. You see Torah, Torat, Toratka. So if you're looking and already familiar with the Hebrew vernacular, in this particular aspect, you got the hay there with Torah, and that ends off. Then you got Torat. All right. So the hay becomes a tau. So the hay does drop off in certain cases. All right. So let's go on to the next part. The matter of Dalets. If the Dalet letter never drops out, but only removed to another part of the same word in reflexive verbs, how does Jew fit in? When the tribes of Israel divided the kingdom, we see that Judah was head of the southern kingdom. 1 Kings chapter 12, verse 17 shows that the king of Judah ruled over the tribes of Israel who lived in Judah. In the book of Esther, we see, as we read, Jew and Jews often. The word for Jew, as seen in Hebrew, is Yehudi. And noting the pattern, we should see Judite or Judahite, but we see Jew. So when we see a Jew there, we want to point out, brothers and sisters, that is a poor translation. All right. After the northern kingdom fell in the 8th century BCE, the kingdom of Judah was still active. The Judahite kingdom included all the people who lived under the reign of Hezekiah to Zedekiah. This would be called Yehudeem, regardless of their own tribes. Esther and Mordecai were called Jews, really should be read as Judahites, but they were from the tribe of Benjamin. So now let's go, if we will, to the book of Esther. All right. So we can gain some understanding. Esther chapter 2, verse 5. Okay. And it reads as follows. We in the book of Esther chapter 2, and we're going to read in verse 5. And it says this. There was a certain Jew in Shushan the castle whose name was Mordecai, the son of Yair, the son of Sheen, the son of Kish, a Benjamite, who had been carried away from Jerusalem with the captives that had been carried away when Yekoniah, king of Judah, whom Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, had carried away. And he brought up Hadassah, that is Esther, his uncle's daughter. For she had neither father nor mother, and the maiden was of beautiful form and fair to look on. And when her father and her mother were dead, Mordecai took her for his own daughter. So this is something we want to point out for edification purposes. So when you're looking at the book of Esther, it says that there was a certain Jew in Shushan the castle. But we already see in that same verse that the man that is talking about there was from the tribe of Benjamin. So we just want to emphasize that the translation as the word Jew, as you may see periodically, such as in Esther, is a poor translation. Okay, let's go on to the next slide. Yehudeem, in the matter of the word Jew. Yehudeem, rather ending off with an I-M or an E-E-M. The word means Judites or Judahites. Jew or Jews cannot be translated or transliterated from Hebrew to English. The prophet Moses did not come down from Mount Sinai with two laws. Yehudeem. And that's what you see in the scriptures periodically. The word Yehudeem, all right, means emphatically Judites or the people of Judah. It does not linguistically mean Jew. And this is what we wanted to point out by showing that the letter that you see in there as the Dalet never drops out. So in translation, we should also be able to see and keep it. But yet the D sound is not in the word Jew or Jewish. You understand? Yet when you go into the Hebrew, when you go into the Akkadian, when you go into the Babylonian, when you go into the Chaldean, when you go into the Persian, and when you go into even the Latin, the D sound, speaking of Jew or Judah, is still there. So Jew, once again, is a poor translation. Let's go on to the next slide. YEHOIACHIN in the Hebrews. We see that the nations did not like Israel and wanted to cut the name of Israel off. Edom was an intricate part of this. Edom and Babylon were friends when Judah was besieged, as pointed out in the writings of Obadiah. During the Babylonian conquest of Judah, mind you, Yehoiachin is on the king of Babylon's list of kings that were conquered. Yehoiachin, king of Judah, and in Babylonian, the D is there, said as Yahudu. Okay, now when you look at that, you may want to look that up. The record of Yehoiachin in Babylon And it speaks about the 2 cillars of corn and so forth that he was allowed to have, or the 2 cillars of oil that they divvied out for him and so forth. And so his name, even while he's a captive, does not have the D sound dropping off. So let's go on, if you will, to the next slide. Thank you. The matter of the Habiru and the Israelites. Let's go. Many records speak of the Habiru. The Habiru were the Hebrews. The Egyptians of the 18th dynasty spoke of this, both Thutmose III and Akhenaten. The time when the Israelites were in the wilderness, we see that they had standards among their tribes: Judah, Issachar, and Zebulun, Ephraim, Benjamin, Manasseh, Gad, Simeon, Reuben, Dan, Naphtali, and Asher. So you had what they called Machane Yehuda, the camp of Judah, and under that was Yissaschar and Zebulun. All right, and then you had Machane Ephraim. All right, the camp of Ephraim, and under that was Benjamin and Manasseh. Then you had Machane Gad, and under that was Simeon and Reuben. Then you had Machane Dan, and under that was Naphtali and Asher. So these are just things we want to point out for edification purposes. All right, as stated in the past, when you see Gad in there, the Hebrew is the root word God, and it comes from the word Gadad or Gedud, which means the troop, as we pointed out in the Hebrew classes in the past. So these are just something we want to point out for a reason and purposes. Next slide. Yehuda, the Dalet in Hebrew never drops. And now let's move on. What you're looking at on the left-hand side, right, is where the tribes were situated in the wilderness, all right, when and after the tabernacle itself was made, and how they was moving about. There was an order to how it was in that particular regard. Let's go on to the next slide. English explains the matter. Shalom. The Hebrew letter Dalet never drops out. Therefore, when speaking of these people, it is imperative to make sure the right pronunciation is stated, or the most accurate pronunciation is stated repetitively. The rules of the language are important. Definitions below from Webster's Unabridged Dictionary. Judah, son of Jacob and Leah, the tribe of Israel descended from Judah, an ancient kingdom in southern Palestine occupied by the tribes of Judah and Benjamin. And governed by the descendants of Solomon. Jew, an adherent of Judaism, a descendant of the Hebrew people. Judaism, the monotheistic religion of the Jewish people, tracing its origins to Abraham, having its spiritual and ethical principles embodied chiefly in the Bible and the Talmud. The cultural, spiritual, and social way of the life of Jewish people. Judaize, to bring into conformity with Judaism, to adopt Jewish customs and beliefs. So we see good and well how the terminology Jew has been attempted to be linked with Judah. But as we can see linguistically and studying it in depth, it doesn't even happen that way in Hebrew. Okay? Now, before I continue on with this presentation, are there any questions in the chat that people may have? Let us continue on. English explains the matter again. The word Jews is nowhere in the Torah. We went over the fact that the D never drops in Hebrew. The point in this tedious task is to show the fact of the crookedness of the word Jew and its effect. In ancient records, we see Judah written as Oda, Yehudu, and Yehudu, etc. In the writings of those nations, we never see Judah mentioned without the D. Some state that Jew is short for Judah. This is inaccurate since history shows that the tribes of Israel lived in the same land as Judah lived. Politically, they would be called Judeans, since they were outnumbered by those of the tribe of Judah. Just the same, the Americans are whites who colonized this North American continent. Yet blacks and others who were forced here or chose to come here are deemed Americans by those who are in other countries, since the whites outnumber those of other people in the North American continent. Since Jew is of no Hebrew equivalent, it is necessary to understand Hebrew, the language, and the history of the people. Since we are speaking English, let us understand some suffixes. Definitions below from Webster's Unabridged Dictionary. And, pertaining to, belonging to. Ite, a person who is a native or resident of a specific place. Ish, of a nationality of. Swedish, Finnish. Having the qualities or characteristics of. Childish or womanish. So it explains, brothers and sisters, in definition, what the definition of the word ish means. All right. So when we say Jewish, it also falls under that particular category. Let's go on. Europeans who spoke on the matter of Jewish people. The only close way to say Jew in Hebrew would be you. You is not a Hebrew word. If somebody said, I need you, in ancient days, the hearer would not think one is speaking of the tribe of Judah. Arthur Koestler, in his book, The 13th Tribe, stated that the origin of the modern Jews, that's to say the white ones, goes back to Togarmah as stated from King Joseph, who was the king of the Khazars. Stephen Jacobs, in his book, Hebrew Heritage of Black Africa, stated that the white Jews are related to the Greeks, Armenians, and Russians, etc., and are not the children of Israel. Kohen Mikael, in his book, Israelites and Jews, The Significant Difference, stated that Hebrew is not of European origin. Yiddish, the dialect which arose out of the Jewish ghettos and is composite of several languages, including German, Polish, and Hebrew. So let's go on to the next slide. Thank you. Sources and references to be noted. Below is a list of foreign nations who spoke of Israel or Judah in their records. Egypt, Amenhotep III. Assyria, Shalmaneser III. Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar, Sennacherib. Persia, Cyrus II, aka Cyrus the Great. He's the one who conquered Babylon. Rome, Tacitus, the Roman historian who lived in the 1st century AD. Judea, Iudae. Somewhere it appears from the Latin to the Old English that the D dropped. This would be the forerunner of the word Jew. French, Latin, and English have a commonality. They are European. How can a European rendition of a people be taken to be legit? A people who came from Western Asia. The writings of the Babylonians in Assyria who spoke of Judah wrote it as Yehudu. Above definition is from Webster's Unabridged Dictionary. Yehudu sounds like Yahudah. Much more than Jew sounds like Judah. The fundamental root letters of Judah are the Yod, the Hey, the Dalet in Hebrew. Anytime one of the fundamental letters is dropped, it is not speaking of the same people. So this is something we want to point out for edification purposes. All right. In concluding this subject, it is important to remember that nobody has all the answers. We are all learning. Certain things are set in stone. All right. Let's go on to the next slide. A conclusion on the matter, Shalom. It is not hard to figure out the fact that the Israelites scattered east toward Babylon, southwest toward Egypt, and south toward Ethiopia. The Israelites did not scatter to Europe and become the Jewish people we see today. The Jewish people are Europeans who converted to a religion that the Khazars were taught by the Edomites. In Genesis chapter 10, we see that Ashkenaz is from Japheth. The Khazars trace their ancestry not to Judah, but rather to Japheth, namely Japheth's grandson, Togarmah. Upon study of the language, we see this concerning the Ite issue. A conclusion, part 2. We are able to see that the E at the end of those in other words shows possession. Just the same in Zechariah chapter 8:23, we read in the Hebrew Yehudi, meaning Judite. Yet they want to translate that into the word Jew, which is quite disrespectful. Okay? The other tribes' names have none of their root letters missing. Concerning Ephraimite, we see Ephrati, and the root is para, meaning to be fruitful. The principal root letters in that word are not dropped either. The hey in para becomes a tau when stating above to show possession. There is no right way to say Jew in Hebrew. Okay, so we're going to go on to the next slide. Thank you. The Hebrews who are in Israel and not from the U.S., what interesting things do they have to say? All right, so this is just something I want to show brothers and sisters and go over. This is an actual video. So let's go and see what this is talking about in this particular regard, shall we? Let's go on.
Flood. Genesis 10:6 refers to the Hamites as the sons of Ham, who inhabited North and Northeast Africa. The sons are Cush, which is present-day Ethiopia, Mizraim, present-day Egypt, Put, present-day Libya, and Canaan, which is present-day Palestine, Israel. The African presence is still visible in Israel today. There are thousands of African Palestinians who live in Israel with deep roots to the land, whose ancestors date back for centuries. I met with Ali Jaddah, tour guide, and the informal mayor of the African Palestinians in Old Jerusalem. I asked him about his life and relations between the Afro-Arabs and the Jews.
Well, life for him, I think it's the hell. I'm one of those people who had experienced that. To be Palestinian, that's a big problem. But to be a black Palestinian, I'm quite convinced it will be the hell, because as a black Palestinian, I am double oppressed by the Israelis. In what way? In what way? I will explain. First of all, they oppress me as a Palestinian. Secondly, they oppress me because of my color. Whenever I go around in the Israeli side, they call me Kushi. Kushi means nigger. Kushi means nigger.
So, in Israel, the land of God, people who are the brothers of the Arabs, two brothers, you are called nigger as I am called nigger in America?
Let's say on the surface, this is what they say, that this is the land of God and we are cousins and there should be total equality. But once you come to the practice, when you come on ground, you will find that there is a lot of discrimination and there is a real divorce between what they say and what they exercise.
Blacks and whites who watch the show saying, so why stay? Why stay when you are called nigger every day? Why stay when you are denied your rights?
On the contrary, the more they humiliate me, the more they oppress me, the more I stick to my land. Because this is my land. I'm so rooted. We are deeply rooted as Africans, as Palestinian Africans in this land. And we know pretty well that our ancestors, I'm talking about thousands and thousands of years, had been here in this country, but they were spread away, taken to Africa, from Africa to the United States. So the more they exercise brutality, the more they exercise oppression against me, the more we are determined to stay, because this is our homeland, and we have a message, we have a holy message that this land should be the land of real peace, not the false peace that they are talking about it now. Palestinian, I'm quite convinced it will be there, because as a black Palestinian, I am double oppressed by the Israelis.
In what way?
In what way? I will explain. First of all,
Pay attention.
they oppress me as a Palestinian. Secondly, they oppress me because of my color. Whenever I go around in the Israeli side, they call me Kushi. Kushi means nigger. Kushi means nigger.
So, in Israel, the land of God, people who are the brothers of the Arabs, two brothers, you are called nigger as I am called nigger in America?
Let's say on the surface, this is what they say, that this is the land of God and we are cousins and there should be total equality. But once you come to the practice, when you come on ground, you will find that there is a lot of discrimination and there is a real divorce between what they say and what they exercise.
Blacks and whites who watch the show saying, so why stay? Why stay when you are called nigger every day? Why stay when you are denied your rights?
On the contrary, the more they humiliate me, the more they oppress me, the more I stick to my land, because this is my land. I'm so rooted. We are deeply rooted as Africans, as Palestinian Africans in this land. And we know pretty well that our ancestors, I'm talking about thousands and thousands of years, had been here in this country, but they were spread away, taken to Africa, from Africa to the United States. So the more they exist, had been here in this country, but they were spread away, taken to Africa, from Africa to the United States. And we know pretty well that our ancestors, I'm talking about thousands and thousands of years, had been here in this country, but they were spread away, taken to Africa, from Africa to the United States. Of years, had been here in this country, but they were spread away, taken to Africa, from Africa to the United States. Palestinian Africans in this land. And we know pretty well that our ancestors, I'm talking about thousands and thousands of years, had been here in this country, but they were spread away, taken to Africa, from Africa to the United States. So the more they exercise brutality, the
Brothers and sisters, the reason why I went over that again and again is because in that interview that was done on BET some years ago, you can distinctly see that the man in the land of Israel is saying that his ancestors were spread away, taken to Africa, and from Africa to the United States. See, let's understand something. The man distinctly said that they was taken, spread away into Africa, and from Africa to the United States. So it's not too hard to figure out, even when looking at that, who that particular man is saying the children of Israel are and what happened to his people. He is saying that his people, all right, was taken in part after being spread in Africa, was taken to the United States.
more they exercise oppression against rooted as Africans, as Palestinian Africans in this land. And we know pretty well that our ancestors, I'm talking about thousands and thousands of years, had been here in this country, but they were spread away, taken to Africa, from Africa to the United States.
So with that being the case, we want to sit back and ask, when were a people taken and spread away into Africa and then from Africa to the United States? When did that happen? What people did that happen to? And what we're looking at, brothers and sisters, on the right-hand side is a depiction of what happened to the people that was taken to the United States, that was spread away in Africa. All right? Those are the descendants of the people that would have been inside of the ancient land that is currently today called Palestine. Now, we want to emphasize that the terminology Palestine is what the Roman Emperor Hadrian called, what Israel called the land of Israel. All right, so that's something we want to emphasize in that particular regard. So when we're looking at this particular thing, and I wanted to go over that again and again and again and again, because the man is distinctly saying inside of an interview, all right, that they was taken away, spread away in Africa, from Africa to the United States. It's not so hard to figure who was he talking about. The black people. So let's go on, if we will, into the next slide. All right. The Jewish people and what they were about. In the 17th century, Sephardic Jews went to Brazil and trade of blacks as slaves. In the 17th century, Jewish people losing land in Brazil went to Barbados to trade blacks as slaves. In the 18th century, Aaron Lopez, a Jewish man, was involved in the slave trade. So this is something, brothers and sisters, that when we're looking at here on the right-hand side, that we want to sit there and emphasize for edification purposes, brothers and sisters. All right, let's go on to the next slide. The Jewish man, slave trade involvement. Jews became Christians in religion and participated in the slave trade. Diogo Dias Querido, Lopez and the Riberas, the Gradices, Mendeses, and Jean Rodriguez Loreno. Now, all of this here I got from a book that is entitled The Slave Trade by Hugh Thomas. Some helped the Danish in slave trade, such as Joshua Henriquez. They were called conversos, such as the Jorge or George family in Spain, as well as in Portugal, Fernero Naronha. They actually used in legal aspect the asiento, which was used by slave traders in the 16th to 19th century. During the Jewish Inquisition, many Jewish people were becoming Christians and participating in the slave trade. This is referred to as crypto-Judaism. So this is something, brothers and sisters, that you can look up for edification purposes. All right, this is what they refer to as crypto-Judaism. When a Jewish person, a regular Jewish person, takes on a regular, quote-unquote, non-Jewish name, all right, and they are masquerading around as Christians, but in actuality, they're Jewish in doctrine. So this is something we just want to point out for edification purposes. Let's go on to the next slide. The Israelites and the Jew, you see the matter, Israel from Judah and the Jew from Japheth. Now, what you're looking at on the right-hand part is the guy, Aaron Lopez, the one that we spoke about earlier as a slave trade, as a person trading our ancestors as slaves. Now, what you're looking at there on the left-hand side is from a depiction of the Lachish wall, all right, showing the tribe of Judah from the city of Lachish that was taken captive. All right, so this is what we want to point out. Now, for the naysayer, and I say this in no disrespect, who attempt to say that Lachish at the time of King Hezekiah was occupied by ancient Egyptians, and thus the Assyrians took Egyptians and not Israelites. I want to emphasize, when you look at the captive in there, like the one that's being showed kneel down and prostrating and so forth to someone, if you look at their hair looks like kind of afro, like maybe like the aspect of Afro puffs, if you will. So looking at that and then knowing ancient Egyptian paint, artwork, and so forth to so on, their males were not even depicted as such. So this is something we want to point out for edification purposes. When you look at the picture that you see there, the way that the captives are even dressed in their own particular garments. They have a garment that goes from the shoulders down to above their ankles, straight way. the ancient Egyptians did not dress as such. So when you look, for instance, in what they call the tomb of Kemunhotep, you see the Asiatics or the Amu dressed similar to what you're seeing in that particular picture right there. So the ancient Egyptians is not the people of Lachish that was taken into the land of Assyrian provinces. All right, those were Israelites from the tribe of Judah. All right, so this is something we want to point out for edification purposes. Let's go on to the next slide. Japheth and Edom explained in part. Ezekiel chapter 36, verse 3 through 5, and it says this. Therefore prophesy and say, thus saith the Lord God, because they have made you desolate and swallowed you up on every side, that ye might be a possession unto the rest of the nations, and ye are taken up in the lips of talkers, and the evil report of the people. Therefore, ye mountains of Yisrael, hear the word of Yah Elohim. Thus saith the Most High to the mountains and to the hills, to the streams, into the valleys, to the desolate places, and to the cities that are forsaken, which are become a prey and derision to the residue of the nations that are round about. Therefore, thus saith the Lord God, surely in the fire of my jealousy, have I spoken against the residue of the nations, and against all Edom, that have appointed my land unto themselves, for a possession and for joy of all their heart, with disdain of soul to cast it out for a prey. So this is something, brothers and sisters, we want to show and go over for edification purposes. It talks emphatically about the people that were being scattered, all right, from their own land, and thus the land in part was left desolate. All right. I would like to take the time, brothers and sisters, to go in the scriptures, if we will. Let's go into the book of Joel, if we will. All right, so we can gain something for edification purposes, brothers and sisters. All right. Now, this is not to take away from the actual presentation, but one of the things to talk about the people saying, well, you know, when you look at the Bible was really taken out of Egypt and so forth and so on, such is not the case, because unless you can show, brothers and sisters, where the Egyptians were known for fighting, in layman terms, the white man, correct me if I'm wrong, they haven't. You had the people of Jugurtha that fought against the Romans. You had the Israelites that fought against the Greeks and the Romans. All right. Even the Romans talk about that. Even the Israelite historian, though his character might have been a little sellout in a way, even Josephus talks about that particular aspect of the Israelites going against the enemies. All right. So let's see what we're talking about in this particular regard. Okay. Let's go, if we will, in the scriptures, in the book of Joel, chapter 4, verse 1. And if you have the regular King James Version, it is in the book of Joel, chapter 3, verse 6. And it says this: for behold, in those days and in at that time, when I shall bring back the captivity of Judah and Jerusalem, I will gather all nations and will bring them down into the valley of Jehoshaphat, and I will enter into judgment with them there, for my people and for my heritage Israel, whom they have scattered among the nations and divided my land. They have cast lots for my people, and have given a boy for a harlot, and sold a girl for wine, and have drunk. So what we're reading right here, brothers and sisters, in the book of Joel, the Masoretic text, chapter 4, verse 1 through verse 3, or in the King James Version, chapter 3, verse 6 through 9, it distinctly says that they have taken the people of Israel, namely in this part of Judah and Jerusalem, and scattered them off, all right, from among the nations, and divided the land. So this is talking about connecting Joel here, what you read here in the book of Ezekiel, chapter 36, verse 5. Okay, and it says this: therefore, thus saith the Lord God, surely in the fire of my jealousy have I spoken against the residue of the nations, and against all Edom, that have appointed my land unto themselves for a possession, with the joy of all their heart, with disdain of soul to cast it out for a prey. So now let's go on, brothers and sisters, and look at Genesis chapter 9, verse 27. And it says this: God enlarged Japheth, and he shall dwell in the tents of Shem, and let Canaan be their servant. Now, as pointed out when this was being taught last Shabbat before yesterday, it says what, brothers and sisters? This is actually a repeat of the teaching that was done on the 10th on this particular channel. Yaft Elohim le Yafet Wayish Kon Ba'ahale Shem. Wahichina'an Ebed Lamo. The point I want to make is that Japheth, said in Hebrew as Yafet, doesn't really mean pretty. It doesn't mean beautiful. It comes from the root word patah. And the root word patah does not mean enlarge. The root word patah means to entice or to persuade. And this is the same root word that you see in Exodus chapter 22 when it says, if a man entice a virgin, that's the same root word there that you see in that particular regard. So this is just something we want to point out for edification purposes. All right. So it should read, God persuade Japheth and he shall dwell in the tents of Shem. Now, how in this particular thing does this connect? He is able to dwell in the tents of Shem because the true house of Israel, as pointed out by the man in the video earlier, was scattered to parts in Africa, then later on taken to the United States. So the children of Israel, the true house of Israel, we can see what exactly happened to them. Now, again, not deviating from this particular aspect, we want to go, brothers and sisters, if we will, all right, to the book of Ezekiel, chapter 17. And let's start in verse 1. Ezekiel chapter 17, verse 1. And the word of Yah came unto me, saying, Son of man, put forth a riddle and speak a parable unto the house of Israel and say, Thus saith the Lord God. Pardon me. I meant to go to Ezekiel chapter 11, verse 17. And it says this. Ezekiel chapter 11, verse 17 says the following. Therefore say, Thus saith the Lord God, I will even gather you from the peoples and assemble you from the countries where you have been scattered, and I will give you the land of Israel. And they shall come there, and they shall take all the detestable things thereof, and all the abominations thereof from thence. So the Jewish man going into the land of Israel did not fulfill the prophecy that you see here in the book of Ezekiel, chapter 11. They didn't go in there and got rid of the detestable things because they are part of the nations that was the detestable things. Now, this is not to sound harsh or disrespectful or anything of that sort. This is not a so-called anti-Semitic teaching or anything of that nature. What we're presenting, brothers and sisters, from video clippings with sources cited, from the scriptures, from reference books and material, and so forth and so on, is things that a person can sit there and look up and study for their own particular self. So when we reject terminologies like, racist or, anti-Semitic and so forth and so on, those things are stated by, no offense intended, those who are not picking up books and studying and correlating one line upon another, one precept upon another. This becomes important as we're going to present in this particular case. All right, let's go on, if we will, to the next part. Eli Wiesel in the matter of a trial along with Theodore Herzl. Eli Wiesel, according to him, Jewish people in Auschwitz stated that God was found guilty for the Holocaust which happened to Jewish people. Theodore Herzl, according to him, Zionist is not to discriminate against one's religion or race. Refer to Zion, the national Jewish idea by Macmillan. So one of the things I want to point out, if we go back in Ezekiel chapter 11, verse 18, it says, and they, speaking of the true house of Israel, and they shall come there, and they shall take away all the detestable things thereof, and all the abominations thereof from thence. And I will give them one heart, and I will put a new spirit within you. And I will remove the stony heart out of your flesh, and will give you a heart of flesh, that they may walk in my statutes and keep my ordinances and do them. And they shall be my people, and I will be their God. So what's going on there? Are the Jewish people in the land of Israel keeping the law, statutes, and commandments, or are they following their Judaic principles? So these are things we just want to show for edification purposes. Theodore Herzl actually thought of Argentina as a place for Jewish people to migrate to. Theodore Herzl was also offered by Joseph Chamberlain land in what is now Kenya. All right. So the Jewish people attempting to find the land for themselves, they actually thought about Kenya. For those who are knowledgeable, they actually thought about Guyana. They actually thought about Argentina. And as stated from the video earlier, because the true Israelite was already scattered into Africa, then taken to the United States, as we shown in an interview earlier on this particular presentation, we begin to see how the land of Israel was vacant of its true inhabitants. The black man in the Western Hemisphere does not have a home in the Western Hemisphere. All right. So no disrespect intended to the people saying we're from Turtle Island. This is our true homeland. The climate alone in this American society shows it to not be native to black people. Okay, so that's something we just want to point out for edification purposes. The climate in the east, in the land of Israel, not to sound disrespectful, shows it to not be suitable for the European people because they're one of the highest rates of skin cancer because of the rays of the sun and the heat that goes on there inside of the land of the east. Whereas we over here are actually complaining in the Western Hemisphere in many cases about the coldness. The European Jews are actually getting sick with skin cancer in the land of Israel because they don't have the melanin within their skin to even sit there and absorb what is referred to as vitamin D from the sun. Whereas we over here are vitamin D deficient because we are in a climate that's not suitable for our people in the Western Hemisphere here in America. So these are just a little things to point out for edification purposes to let it be known, brothers and sisters, that we, the true house of Israel, are in part the people that's over here. There are Israelites in other parts of the world, don't get me wrong. But as pointed out in there, the bulk of the children of Israel was scattered into Africa, and the bulk of those from scattered in Africa was shipped over to the United States and the West Indies in part. So these are things we just want to show and present for edification purposes. Next slide, please. Solomon in a matter of a scattering. All right. 1 Kings chapter 10, verse 22. So we can sit there and read this for edification purposes. We are in, brothers and sisters, the book of 1 Kings, chapter 10, verse 22. All right, so we can gain some understanding of what we're talking about in this particular regard. And it says this. For the king had at sea a navy of Tarshish with the navy of Harim, once every 3 years once every 3 years came the navy of Tarshish, bringing gold and silver and ivory and apes and peacocks. So these are things we want to show, brothers and sisters. Solomon had in what can be stated as a zoo. So when he had a navy over there in Tarshish of Spain, we best know and understand, brothers and sisters, that the Israelites were in part scattered in certain parts of Spain. And history would show that the first slave ship left from Spain. Okay, so these are things we just want to point out for edification purposes. It says what? For the king had at sea a navy of Tarshish with the navy of Harim. Harim is the king of Zidon. The Zidonians and the Israelites in part make up what history refers to as the Phoenicians. The Phoenicians after the time of Solomon, during the time of Ahab, king of Israel, in many cases went over into the Mediterranean and set up and what later on became known as Carthage in Tunisia. This is why when you go, for instance, in the book Hebrewisms of West Africa, it talks about the Jews of Carthage. So these are just a little things that we just want to keep on keeping fresh information coming out from the scriptures for edification purposes. And not to sound haughty, as Shema Yisrael for free. Okay, so let's go on, if we will, and we're going to go, brothers and sisters, into the book of Jeremiah, chapter 44. Now, Jeremiah was after the timing of the Solomon king, or King Solomon, right? And here's what we read in Jeremiah, chapter 44, and we're going to start, brothers and sisters, in verse 1. And it says this. The word that came to Jeremiah concerning all the Jews that dwelt in the land of Egypt, that dwelt at Migdol and at Tapanhes and at Noph, and in the country of Patros, saying, Thus saith the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, you have seen all the evil that I have brought upon Jerusalem and upon all the cities of Judah. And behold, this day they are a desolation, and no man dwelleth therein, because of their wickedness which they have committed to provoke me, and that they went to offer and to serve other gods whom they knew not, neither they nor ye nor your fathers. Howbeit, I sent unto you all my servants the prophets, sending them betimes and often, saying, Oh, do not this abominable thing that I hate. But they hearken not, nor incline their ear to turn from their wickedness, to forbear offering unto other gods. Wherefore my fury and my anger was poured forth, and was kindled in the cities of Judah and in the streets of Jerusalem, that they are wasted and desolate as at this day. So they are wasted and desolate of the true house of Israel. All right. The true Israelites was the ones that was inside those lands that we already shown the depiction from the aspect of Assyrians taking Israelites out of Lachish into the Assyrian provinces. So these are things we just want to point out. As emphasized before, Assyria lost to Babylon in the 7th century BCE. And then you have it to where when Babylon came into power, they took the people of the tribe of Judah into captivity. So what happened in part to the Israelites that was in Assyria when Assyria fell to the Babylonians? One understanding is that many of them came over to the Western Hemisphere, which some people quote the book of Ezra, chapter 13, speaking about in Apocrypha, speaking about they went over to a journey for a year and a half to a land that no man dwelt, what they called Al-Saret, which means the remnant or Mount of the remnant or so forth. That's one teaching. Some people say that Al-Saret is the land that they just went through as they were migrating into certain parts of Africa. One of the things we want to point out is that the Israelite uprising that happened in Cyrene during the era of what you call Emperor Trajan and Nerva and so forth and so on, in the 2nd century AD or 2nd century CE, pardon me, the Israelites was already scattered in certain parts of Africa already. All right. That's what we want to point out for edification purposes. So now, when you go in your own time into the book of 2nd Maccabees, it speaks about the Jews, or that's to say the people of Judah that dwelt in the land of Egypt, and how the author was wishing them peace and health. So when you go in the book of Kings, then in the book of Isaiah, then the book of Jeremiah, then in the book of 2nd Maccabees, those places are talking about Israelites that were scattered inside of certain places, many in cases of their own volition. They didn't go to Europe in their own volition and set up shop in places that we call England and Poland and Czechoslovakia. Now, this is not to say that those places did not have any sprinkles of the house of Israel scattered from one end of the earth to the other. However, the bulk of the house of Israel did not go into no European places. The bulk of the house of Israel, if you remember, when Jeroboam was going to be killed by Solomon, he fled to Egypt. When Uriah the prophet was running from and fleeing, that is, then, from YEHOIACHIN, king of Judah, he ran into Egypt. When the Israelites saw that the destruction was coming upon them, in part, that is, they took Jeremiah, went into the land of Egypt. So we're speaking about different people in different times going into political reasons for the aspect of saving one's life, that the Israelites fled into Africa. The Israelites fled into Africa to help save their life. When was there any great mass migration of white people into the continent of Africa before the Atlantic slave trade, before the colonization of Africa in the 1880s? All right, before the guy Leopold did what he did with the wickedness that he was into regarding rubber from the Congo. My question is this: when do you find a great aspect and number of people migrating into African places that were not black people prior to the time of the Atlantic slave trade, because you have the Bible in the book of Jeremiah here that talks about it. In your own time, as we went over before, you can look up the Elephantine Papyrus that actually speaks about Israelites. The Passover Papyrus that also speaks about the Israelites. Look this up when you care to, all right? The children read in Hebrew in Exodus chapter 31. Now, when we did this particular teaching back on March 10th on the Shabbat, I called up two of the young men by name, one of them being Jamad, the son of Adon-Yadar, and the other one being Aziel, the son of Prince Nathanael. All right, but I'm going to read the Hebrew here, starting on the right-hand side. It says, Ara'eh, behold, Kwarati, I have called Bashem by name, Bezalel ben Uri, the son of Uri, ben Kur, the son of Kur, Lamate Yehuda, of the tribe of Judah, Wa Amalei Oto, and I have filled within him Ruach Elohim, the Spirit of God, Bakakma, and wisdom, Ubit Buna, and understanding, Ub Da'at, and knowledge, Ub Kol Malaka, and all manner of workmanship, Lachshob Makshabot, to work with the weaver, or to work with the skillful workman, La'asot Bazahab, to work or to do in gold, Ub Bachesef, and in silver, Uban Koshet, and in brass. Lachshob Makshabot, La'asot Bazahab, Ubakesef, Uban Koshet, Ubakaroshet, Aben Lamalot, Ubakaroshet 8, Asot Bakol Malaka, and to work in all manner of skillful workmanship and brass and in wood of the trees to make it so, and all manner of workmanship. Wa ani hine natati ito, and behold, I, even I, have given with him et Ahaliab ben Akisamak, even Ahaliab, the son of Akisamak, Lamate Dan, of the tribe of Dan, Ub Lab Kal, and with heart of all, kakam lab, and all the wise hearted. Natati kakma, I have given wisdom. Wa asu, and they did. Et kal asho ziwitika, and they shall do, pardon me, that's the future tense. And they shall do all that I shall command thee. So this is just something we want to point out for edification purposes. Shalom Yisrael. I can be contacted at 908-587-4841. All right, 908-587-4841. This has been a teaching brought to you from the congregation Shema Yisrael. All right, inside of the description, there will be videos that accompany this kind of video. All right, so let's conclude out, brothers and sisters, with this yet again.
Flood. Genesis 10:6 refers to the Hamites as the sons of Ham, who inhabited North and Northeast Africa. The sons are Cush, which is present-day Ethiopia, Mizraim, present-day Egypt, Put, present-day Libya, and Canaan, which is present-day Palestine, Israel. The African presence is still visible in Israel today. There are thousands of African Palestinians who live in Israel with deep roots to the land, whose ancestors date back for centuries.
Now, I want to emphasize, and it's not to play the color game or anything of that sort, but look at the people whom they're showing, and look at what the camera right there is focused on. That's a natural here, if you want to use that terminology, sister. All right, looking no different than coming from the West Indies or anything of that sort, looking no different than coming from some parts of the South for edification purposes. So let's see, and going over this yet again, what is said about the children of Yisrael. Let's go on.
I met with Ali Jaddah, tour guide, and the informal mayor of the African Palestinians in Old Jerusalem.
Informal mayor. So he has a political status. All right. So we want to show this for edification purposes. Let's go on and let's see what this gentleman, all right, elder to me for sure, what he had to say about the scattering of the Israelites. So you won't just think it's some black Negro, so-called African American coming out of the trenches of Brooklyn, New York, inside of a camp called Shema that just want to feel special. No, let's see what is being stated across the Atlantic Ocean years ago on the internet, on BET. All right, so let's go on and see what it says.
I asked him about his life and relations between the Afro-Arabs and the Jews.
Well, life for him, I think it's the hell. I'm one of those people who had experienced that. To be Palestinian, that's a big problem. But to be a black Palestinian, I'm quite convinced it will be the hell, because as a black Palestinian, I am double oppressed by the Israelis.
All right, right there, he said, as a black Palestinian, all right, he is double oppressed by the Israelis. So when you look at, for instance, I'm not a Muslim, I'm not a follower, nor a adherer to the teachings of Louis Farrakhan, but even if you look at Khalid Muhammad, and may he rest in peace, and what he said about what he found is not what Brother Malcolm found, all right? He said when he went to the land of Israel, he said that the black Jew was under the white Jew. So let's see what we're looking at in this particular regard. All right. So also for those who are familiar, this right here also kind of puts a dagger, if you want to use that terminology, inside of the aspect of the European Jew and the claims made against even us as who they call the Black Hebrew Israelites. All right. So let's go on. You can look up the man's name, Ali Jidah, and see what you're going to find concerning this kind of subject. All right. This is not just something we're making up because we have nothing better to do.
In what way? I will explain. First of all, they oppress me as a Palestinian. Secondly, they oppress me because of my color. Whenever I go around in the Israeli side, they call me Kushi. Kushi means nigger.
Now, of course, they're going to use that terminology, Kushi, saying nigger, to be disrespectful. Brothers and sisters, looking at this particular thing and aspect right here, he was the informal mayor, and he is even called that by the European Jews. There is a video that's went out called In Search of Bin Laden. All right. And it's a tour guide from a European that went over into Egypt and other parts. He went into the land of Israel. Now, this happens to be, not being funny, a regular white dude. And he was treated not bad per se by the Arabian people, but he was pushed and shoved by the European Jews, the Hasidics, if you will. In America, referred to perhaps as the Lubavitch, if you will. Those are the ones who was disrespectful to that particular tour guide or that particular person. And it's a video I'm talking about called In Search of Bin Laden. The people who bothered him was not the people in Arabia. The people who pushed him physically and shoved him and everything like that were the European Jews. Let's go on, if we will.
Which means nigger.
So, in Israel, the land of God, people who are the brothers of the Arabs, two brothers, you are called nigger as I am called nigger in America.
Is he called nigger in the land of Israel as the woman is called nigger in America? Yes, because they're the same stock of the European people. So that's what that is. America is in debt to the state of Israel, not the children of Israel. They don't pay us, but they sit there and give billions of dollars, give, not loan, billions of dollars every year to the state of Israel. The Jewish man is the one that runs them. The Jewish man is the one that controls them. All right, let's go on.
Let's say on the surface, this is what they say, that this is the land of God and we are cousins and there should be total equality. But once you come to the practice, when you come on ground, you will find that there is a lot of discrimination.
So when you go on ground, you find out that there's a lot of discrimination, just like if you take our brothers and sisters from the West Indies who came over here under the guise that some were saying, like from Panama, oh, we thought the streets was paved with gold. You was lied to. All right. So what he's telling you is what's going on there. It is already known by us as Israelites. When you go dressed in your garments and you're in Tel Aviv airport, they stop you and detain you and ask you, what are you doing there? That is not the land of the free and the home of the brave in the land of the East. Let's go on, brothers and sisters.
And there is a real divorce between what they say and what they exercise.
There is a real difference between what they say and what they exercise. So the white man in the land of Israel is not different in character than the white man over here, because what they talk about and what they exercise is two different things. Let's go on.
Blacks and whites who watch the show saying, so why stay? Why stay when you are called nigger every day? Why stay when you are denied your rights?
On the contrary, the more they humiliate me, the more they oppress me, the more I stick to my land. Because this is my land. I'm so rooted. We are deeply rooted as Africans, as Palestinian. I stick to my land. Because this is my land. I'm so rooted. The more they humiliate me, the more they oppress me, the more I stick to my land. Because this is my land. I'm so rooted. We are deeply rooted as Africans, as Palestinian Africans in this land. And we know pretty well that our ancestors, I'm talking about thousands and thousands of years, had been here in this country, but they were spread away, taken to Africa, from Africa to the United States.